will call to order the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission for July 10th, 2018. This meeting is being both audio and video recorded. Commissioner Buscarin had said he would call in. He has not. The line is open, so when he joins us, he will announce himself. He is, if he participates, it'll be remotely as his physical attendance is unreasonably difficult. Are there any comments on the agenda? Hearing none, agenda will be adopted as presented. Are there any comments on the draft minutes of June 12th or June 29th? Do I have to take a roll call if he's not on the phone?
No.
Okay. All right.
I move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Is there a motion to ratify the warrants of June 20th, 2018 and June 30th, 2018?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We have to elect a chairman and a vice chairman. Are there any nominees for the office of chairman?
I nominate Dan Drake.
I'll second.
Any others? Mr. Buscarin?
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Buscarin. We've just started. We're at the election of officers. I have been nominated as chair. Do you wish to nominate anybody else?
I think I'll waive that honor.
All right. We'll proceed to a vote. Well, it has to be now a roll call because Mr. Buscarin has joined us. All those in favor of Mr. Drake as chairman? How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin? Sorry.
I vote aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, or probably should abstain. Why don't I abstain? Is there a nomination or nominations for the office of vice chair?
Well, I think Mr. Gasparo is doing a wonderful job, so I nominate him. I'll second.
Thank you.
Any other candidates? Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Abstain.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none. Pending leases and contracts. I think we just have two. Mr. Rafter?
Yes, there are two items. One, the first is a catering license with Nantucket On Island Chefs, and that's the annual business fee of $1,500. And the second is a contract amendment with the Nice Electric Services. That's a credit of $6,217 on the seasonal hold room electrical services they perform.
Wish we had more of those. Is there any other discussion?
I move approval of the two pending, of the license and the contract amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
Thank you. Pending matters, Mr. Rafter.
On the general fund repayment, there's no change there. The town is still preparing to appeal the FAA's decision to approve a reduced amount. The crew quarters development, the finance director from town is still waiting on a response back from bond counsel to determine whether or not bonds can be used for employee housing. And on the Part 139 certification letter of correction update, of the 8 items that were identified in the letter of correction, 7 have been addressed. The only outstanding item is the creation of a concrete regeneration pad. We currently have an asphalt regen pad, and we have until August 20th to have that completed, which will be done by then.
Any questions? Comments? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is air service update. Who is going to make the presentation? Mr. Wolf, or you? If you wouldn't mind going up to the mic and identifying yourself. And I'm going to move around the table,
And-
if I may, for now.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd love to invite Linda Markham, who is Cape Air's president, up with me, just in case I need correcting. She definitely could do that.
Absolutely.
So this is not a specific issue or a specific agenda item, but I do think, especially in times of volatility in our industry, and especially because this island, unique to a lot of our destinations, actually is dependent on air service. There are two ways on and off the island. One is by water and one is by air. And so I just thought it would be great to have a conversation, make a short presentation, take any questions if anybody has it. Cape Air, Nantucket Airlines, we've been privileged to serve this community now for 34 years. I've been flying on and off Nantucket for 41 years. I learned to fly on the Cape in Chatham 41 years ago. So there's a long history. I remember the first flights I had out here at night, there was not a light in sight back then. And now, of course, there's practically a city glow. So there's a real history here. Linda, so I'm Daniel Wolf. I'm the founder and the CEO of Cape Air and Nantucket Airlines.
And Linda Markham, President and Chief Administrative Officer at Cape Air. Been with Cape Air for 16 years.
So, in a way of hopefully what's an ongoing dialogue, because I apologize for sort of inviting myself to the party, but to the degree that you would like updates from our perspective on what's going on in the industry and what's going on with our company, I would volunteer coming here at your behest and making presentations, whether they be about the industry or specifically about what we're doing. I also want to introduce Elise Magnato, who is both Linda and my assistant, and Bruce Miller, who probably needs no introduction here on the island, but Bruce has been on the board of Cape Air for somewhere between 12 and 15 years. And as part of the service commitment here, we've made a real effort to have people involved at various levels who have very deep roots here on the island. So Bruce, it's been a privilege to work with you these many years, and we thank you for your guidance and input. So just a few slides, a little bit about what's going on in the industry, a little bit about what's going on at our company, which I think will shed some light and maybe get a conversation going either tonight or after if you'd like to do that. So we just introduced ourselves, but we have, as I said, been serving Nantucket now for 34 years. We're the only year-round air service to a hub, the hub being Boston. We are currently the nation's largest commuter airline. We have 87 aircraft, 34 cities, 750 employees. One of the reasons that's important, it's not to impress you, even though I can tell by your reaction to this that you're all incredibly impressed. But I think it's really important to understand that part of what we can offer here is dependent on us having a scaling ability, being big enough so that we can afford things like a reservation system, like all of the interline agreements that we have, a security program like we have that allows us to go in and out of Logan Airport behind security. So a lot of the amenities that we can offer this community as far as seamless interaction with the air transportation industry come as a result of the size that we've been able to achieve. That having been said, it all started here 34 years ago between Hyannis and Nantucket, as many of you know. And I've got a slide in here about what that market has done since especially the high-speed ferry came into the market back in 1999. That's currently our route map for a number of years. As you all know, seasonally we did serve Providence, Rhode Island. We may at some point re-enter the Providence market. However, instead of us going back into that market right away, Southwest Airlines actually followed us to Boston. So as many of you know, Southwest, which was the big attraction to Providence, is now in Boston as well. So we would love to hear input from you as to whether Providence is a good destination. Currently, Westchester County, we serve on a seasonal basis. There are a few other operators that do that as well. And we're currently looking at other New York opportunities and more on that later. But it is a dialogue that we're having. And if we did that, hopefully it would be in partnership with your seasonal operator, JetBlue here. Next slide. As I said, part of the ability that Cape Air has had because it scales and we can pay for it because of revenue from other markets. As you know, our primary relationship in the industry is with JetBlue. JetBlue is currently the largest operator at Logan Airport. So when you fly into Boston, if you're going to one of the dozens of cities that JetBlue serves, it's a very seamless connection. And as you know, you can buy our tickets on their website. We also have great relationships with Delta, Alaska, United, and American. American, as you'll see in the next slide, is the second largest carrier at Logan. We're the third currently. Because of that, it allows us to have the reservation system, the global distribution, the TSA PreCheck, which I'm sure you're all members of the TSA PreCheck Association now. And of course, we get a good benefit from being part of the Essential Air Service program, which is a federal program and allows us to serve a lot of the smaller communities that we serve in the Midwest and out in Montana as well. And as you know, we are co-located conveniently with JetBlue in Terminal C in Boston. This sounds like an advertisement, but it really isn't, even though I guess maybe it is. I didn't realize this was televised, but it's kind of convenient. Next slide. So there's Boston. It's why Boston is so important to the community here. You can virtually go anywhere in the world from Boston now. It's amazing in the 41 years I've been flying that Boston has really become a global airport with great connections to just about anywhere in the world. I flew last week out to see our new airplane in Italy, and I flew out of Boston. Not that many years ago, I would have had to go to New York or another big airport, but now you can go anywhere in the world. As you can see, JetBlue on a monthly basis does over 4,500 flights. The next largest carrier as far as operations is American, which is just shy of 2,500. And then Cape Air, we fly just shy of 2,000 flights a month scheduled, and that doesn't include additional sections that we might fly. So I think in a busy month, we actually might fly more than American as far as the number of operations in and out of Boston. And then you can see Delta and United and Alaska as well. The challenges out here, you know them as well as we do. When people say, where do you live? I say we live in one of the most extreme climates in North America. And I think we do. I think it's not even arguable. When you look at wind and you look at winter weather and storms, tropical systems, the fog, this is a really, really challenging climate that we live in, and I don't think it's getting any less so. The seasonality, as you're going to see in the next slide, many have come and gone because they underestimate what it really costs to manage the seasonality of the markets here in the Cape and Islands. We've done a couple of things. A, we operate the size of airplane that allows you to adjust capacity as weather changes seasonally. And so that's a major part of it. And B, we identified and we serve markets, counter-seasonal markets down south, so that some of the capacity that we're serving the market with up here in the summer, we're able to keep busy during the winter in some of our winter markets down in the Caribbean. Noise sensitivity, we were discussing it on the way over here, but back in the days when Nantucket Airlines was Chuck Harris and Scott LaForge and Billy McGrath had Island Airlines, and there were a handful of other carriers. I'm really proud that we were at the table when, first of all, to the community, the sound went out that there was no Part 150 study because of the weird way that Nantucket, the service patterns to Nantucket didn't actually trigger a Part 150 noise study. But clearly, with the number of arrivals and departures and overflights, given the fact that the airport is on the south side of the island and the town is on the north side, there was a noise issue, and we stepped right to the plate and have been voluntarily flying a noise abatement procedure for the last 25 years or so. We can always improve on that. I think part of the ongoing dialogue we should have with you as a commission is how we can do better with noise abatement, because we certainly understand that the character of the community here and the environmental sensitivity. Air service is key and essential to this island. It's a vital link, but on the other hand, we should do whatever we can be in partnership with you to mitigate that. Next slide, please. Here's a walk down memory lane. I would offer, how about this? I would offer a free round trip ticket to Hyannis for anyone who can name an airline that is not on that list that served the island. But I think, as I thought about coming and talking with you today, I thought, oh my God, just in my lifetime, the number of airlines that have come and tried, and certainly none of them have had 34 years here in their tenure here. But I'm sure each one of you, as you read down that list, is remembering an interaction you had with one of those airlines. I would also say, specifically to Tom, but also to the commission, that when airlines have left airports, they usually leave a rather sizable financial obligation on the table when they leave. And I didn't rehearse this, but Tom, how are we at paying our bills? Okay, so that was a risky question, actually, not knowing the answer. But one of the things that I've said for the 25 years, I was an airport manager back at the Chatham Airport, and I know how difficult the finances can be at an airport. So one of the commitments we have when we get to pay time at the end of the month is that the airports that we serve get paid first, because I know how important that is to the airport and the aviation community. Anybody notice any airlines that aren't on there? I hate to use the word defunct. There's probably a better word, but those that have come and gone. It's kind of interesting, the list. I mean, it's an amazing list. Both big and small carriers that have come and gone. We're going to give this presentation to you so you can have some time with it to find airlines that may have come and gone. By the way, we just did this by memory. We just had a group of us old timers. Walter Flaherty's here. We should have consulted Walter. You probably see some that know some that aren't up there, right?
No, you did a good job on that.
Yeah, we tried. Next slide, please.
Is Eastern Express Eastern Airlines?
Well, so there were two. Eastern Airlines actually came in here, but Eastern Express was also in here.
Because Eastern Airlines isn't up there.
Okay, so, yeah, he wins. We're going to have to check this with the Nantucket Ethics Commission to make sure that you can accept the round-trip ticket. I don't want
won't
to...
take the round-trip ticket.
Okay, so let the record
out
show that
there.
the chair of the airport commission has declined the round-trip ticket, just for the record. This is a fascinating slide. It looks like it's getting ready for a ski trip somewhere, but this slide shows, in one slide, some of the changes in the air service pattern for us, for Cape Air, back to 2007. And if you went beyond that, back beyond that, the high-speed ferry started in 1999. The market totally changed when the high-speed ferry started, and for obvious reasons. There's an economic advantage to the high-speed ferry. There's not that much of a penalty relative to time, since you can go downtown to downtown in just over an hour. But if you look at that AC Air, which is Nantucket Airlines, which is the Hyannis Nantucket market, you can see what that has done. And this is just between Hyannis and Nantucket, this slide. So it shows that other carriers were in there competitively back as recently as 2007. But the challenges of this market, primarily because of the high-speed ferry, but also because of some of the costs associated with flying, fuel's gone up, maintaining the airplanes has gone up. You can see that the sole survivor on that market, with the exception of Retrix, who entered the market about a year and a half ago, continues to be Nantucket Airlines. It is a really challenging market for us to provide service on, because the economics of it are really, really challenging. And that's something that, in a more detailed setting, we could sit down with you and have that discussion. That market at its peak back in 1999 and 2000, we were just flying just Nantucket Airlines, 182,000 people a year on the Hyannis Nantucket market. And we were splitting the market at that point about 50-50 with Island Airlines. So the total market back then was almost 400,000 passengers. And as you'll see on the next slide, you can see what's happened is the ferry started in 91 as about 35%, and about 65% was by air. Actually, I'm sorry, the other way around. The ferry actually had a good share back then before there was a lot of air service. You can see that as the air service picked up, it was split about 50-50. And then after the high-speed ferry really kicked in, you can see that it really took the wind out of the sails for the air service. And the high-speed ferries, which are doing a great job, and there's a ton of capacity between the steamship and Highline, but the high-speed ferries are now carrying over 70% of the market, and air is down to about 30% of that market. It is my hope and plan in the long run, as we get in front of the pilot shortage that we're going to talk about in a minute, that we put a little bit more capacity back into the Hyannis Nantucket market, and that we have a better pricing model, a more variable pricing model that will allow us to pick back up some of the market share on the Hyannis Nantucket market. But you can see there over the last 20-some years what the market share has done, boat versus air. This shows you the different markets that we fly. What's interesting is Boston, Nantucket Boston has been the most consistent. That's the blue bar at the bottom. And you can see back to 2001, right up and through last year, that for us has been around a 50 to 70,000 passenger market round trip. You can see New Bedford, which has also, due to the costs and due to the ability to drive to Hyannis and get on the high-speed ferry, that market has diminished somewhat. Providence, as I said before, has gone away. White Plains is a competitive market, and that's a good market for us seasonally. The Vineyard has been pretty steady state, and again, as we talked about Hyannis, the most dramatic change in our air service out here has been what's happened to the Hyannis-Nantucket market. I don't know if there are any questions on that. One of the interesting things about that slide is you can see that even when JetBlue entered the market a few years ago, our numbers stayed pretty consistent. So that their capacity in the market has just made that a stronger market overall.
I assume, wasn't 2008 about when the Gray Lady 3 or whatever it's called came in, and then 2016 was when the newest one
Yeah.
came in?
You can really see the impact of the additional capacity. There are so many seats on a daily basis between Hyannis and Nantucket on high-speed water transportation. When you think of it, 380 to 400,000 people a year means that we were flying over 1,000 people a day on average between Hyannis and Nantucket. So when I talked about the noise issue before, those 1,000 people a day were all on 9-passenger airplanes. So if you do the math, we were doing over 100 flights a day between Hyannis and Nantucket in 9-passenger airplanes. So you divide that into a 10 or 12-hour day, you had an overflight of the island every 6 or 7 minutes, day after day after day back then. So even though the FAA didn't recognize it as triggering a Part 150 study, there's no question that that kind of frequency was an issue for the island. Next slide. And I'm probably going to turn the mic over to Linda in a second to talk about operational excellence, but one of the things that happened to us, and there is a critical nationwide shortage of pilots, as you know, in 2015 and 2016, as we continued to train and grow our pilot group, we had 40 pilots that we had brought in to Cape Air in 2015, gotten them up to their airline transport pilot rating, ready to fly in the left seat for Cape Air, and then left without flying a single revenue hour. And so when Dan and Tom came out to my office about 1.5 years ago, I think, and we had some talks about what was going on with the service at that point, we had a critical shortage of flight crews, and we were stretching the rubber band, and I will admit, too tight at that point, and we were having some real service failures. Do you want to talk a little bit, Linda, about operational excellence and that initiative?
Sure. So in December of 16, we put together an initiative at Cape Air. It's called Operational Excellence, where our entire senior leadership team meets every morning to review the operation, review the prior day operation, and then review the day of, to look at how the operation is doing from a delay, cancellations, and customer service. We have all disciplines of the organization, including our flight ops team. Dan and I attend, as well as our finance, marketing, and customer service. As you can see from the graph, when we started these meetings, we were at 85% completion, which obviously that is not a good percentage to be at.
How do you define completion?
That we complete the flight.
So a flight that's scheduled with passengers booked on it
Yep.
would go or not. Now that includes weather cancellations. So as you know,
It does not take into account significant weather delays.
no, we actually track delays differently.
Okay.
That does not take into account weather delays. We had that discussion this morning, Dan, which was at what point when you consolidate flights, so if you have an 8 a.m. flight that's delayed for fog and you roll those passengers into a 10 o'clock, does the 8 o'clock count as a cancellation or not? And the answer is yeah, so that's in there. So any flight that we scheduled to operate that had passengers on it that did not go for whatever reason. So we also divide it into what we call company controllable and company non-controllable. So company non-controllable is weather. A company non-controllable is an air traffic situation. Like, for example, the runway situation in Boston last summer, we canceled a lot of flights because the runway construction up there was so restricting operations in and out of Logan that we actually had some flights that we had to cancel back then. So those are what we call company uncontrollable. Company controllable really fall into two categories. One is a maintenance cancellation due to a mechanical issue with the airplane, and the other is a crew situation. That is not being able to crew an airplane or having a crew call in sick. So those are the two what we call company controllable.
So, and as you can see, as of April 18, our completion rate has risen up to over 97%. The dip in September was the hurricanes that we had in the Caribbean. And as Dan said, a lot of this right now is completions, but we are focused on delays as well. Next slide. this is a little bit of eye test here, but if you look at how many flights that we canceled, and this was back in the beginning of the year, we had over 500 controllable cancellations. And as Dan said, that would have been for crew issues and for maintenance. And where we are today is, and this isn't even depictive of this morning's graph that we looked at, but we were under 100 that we canceled for controllable. So we are making good progress. We're not there yet, but we certainly have this initiative in place to really focus our energy in this area.
And I want to be real clear, this is company-wide, so this includes the Caribbean, Montana, St. Louis. This is all cancellations company-wide. To put it in perspective, we average about 500 flights a day. So year-round, that's somewhere between 120 and 140,000 flights. So that looks like a huge number, but again, that's company-wide. But I think what's great about tracking these statistics is you really understand what the focus and effort on it is. For those here today and for those that are watching this on television who experienced a service failure up until 2 years ago, I think you're seeing a real improvement. We'd love to hear more and more from customers, but Linda and I track it by how many actual complaints we get, because we still are available and open to getting emails and to get phone calls. And I can tell you that that has remarkably gone down in the last year or two. Our employees experience it because it's very stressful for the employees also when they're canceling flights. So certainly stay in touch with us and let us know, but it's been a real initiative. One of the ways we've accomplished that is we are putting redundancy all over the system, so that we spare extra airplanes and extra crews in Hyannis, in Boston, in Nantucket where it's warranted, so that if there is an issue with a crew call or with a mechanical with an airplane, we're much more set up to recover from that and operate without a cancellation, and usually even without a delay.
Dan, of the roughly, let's say 40 to 45 cancellations in June,
Yep.
how many of those were crew-related and how many were mechanical, do you know?
The majority are mechanical in that case. Because of the redundancy and because of how we're scheduling crews, we very, very seldom have a crew cancellation now. And again, that's because we're scheduling crews. I can tell you where this really shows is our bottom line, but it should. I mean, a good service company sacrifices bottom line for service, because it's all about long-term reputation. We certainly did damage to our reputation in 2015, 2016, and even part of 2017. And what I've said internally and what I'd say to the community here is it takes at least 2 years to turn a reputation around. And I dare say on the list that you just saw of all the airlines that came and went, most of those airlines trashed their reputation and never were able to get it back. And our commitment is to work as hard as we can to provide the type of service so that the buzz at cocktail parties or at the beach or wherever the buzz is going on is, wow, we've noticed that that is a company which has dedicated itself over and over again to making this right. When we have a service failure, our commitment is to go above and beyond to try to fix it. Now, this is a vital link to the island. And a bit of what you're hearing today is a mea culpa for what you saw a year and a half ago. But what you're really hearing is the pride of the 750 employees who are now, I think, providing a really good and reliable product. And I hope that you're experiencing that. It's hard because if you only fly 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, 4 or 5 times ago might have been a year and a half ago where you didn't have a good experience. So it takes time to build that reliability and reputation back. Our biggest secret shopper is Bruce Miller, who was on our board, and said to me at the last board meeting, which was just last month, he said, I'm finally starting to feel confident that when I show up at the counter, I'm going to get what I'm bargaining for. Bruce, do you want to add to that at all?
That's a fair approximation of my feeling, and it has drastically improved.
So, next slide. For those who know the heart and soul of Cape Air, it goes way beyond air service for us. It has to start with a reliable air service, obviously, but we do as much as we can in the community here. Again, airlines are not extremely profitable entities, but to really try to understand where we can plug into the community. As you know, Kim Corcoran, who recently retired, just did a fantastic job representing the company for 25 plus years out here. And we plan to keep on celebrating the wonderful job she did and continues to do in spirit for us. But we stay as plugged in as we can. Bruce said the Nantucket Foundation is actually doing their grants to tonight. Their grant ceremony, and we do a lot with the Community Foundation out here as well, and other organizations. And if anybody in the audience or watching on television would like to see us involved in any of the organizations out here, please let us know. Elise Magnato, who I introduced earlier, assists Linda and me, but her title is Community Engagement, which is why the slide is titled Community Engagement, I would guess. Next. Other quick updates. The pilot shortage, you want to?
Sure. As Dan mentioned, there is a nationwide pilot shortage, and mainly this was due to a rule that changed that now requires that all pilots have 1,500 hours to fly and have an airport transport license certificate. So before you used to be able to fly with 250 hours as a first officer. Now that requirement is you have to have 1,500 hours. So there was a real sucking sound in the industry that there was all this hiring going on, particularly in the regional airlines. And as Dan's mentioned, we lost 40 pilots in 2016. We've had an initiative going on with pilot sourcing for probably about the past 10 years. We have a relationship with JetBlue, which is a pathway program, starting at the university, then coming to Cape Air, and then they go on to JetBlue. We have relationships with about 34 different universities, as well as other airlines that we're starting to form other pathway programs to have other opportunities for pilots. So we're starting to get ahead of the pilot shortage, but it is a challenge. And it's something that really, I think, is the biggest challenge we face as an organization. I would say probably within the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, we're going to start seeing the curve hopefully improve. But certainly it's something that we are mindful of. And as Dan said, one of the biggest challenges that we face. Next slide.
Can I just speak
Sure.
for a second? Can you go back? Can you go back? One of the things you're seeing on that is 2026. It looks like the deficit is worse and not getting better. I'm actually optimistic that now that the aircraft manufacturers and airlines acknowledge that there's a shortage, they're starting to get more involved in pilot training. And I think that curve is not going to actually be, I think that curve is not a good prophecy of what's going to happen. But that currently is a pretty ugly slide for us. One of the other things you hear, am I hearing music?
I'm hearing
Is anybody else hearing that? Oh my God, the
Your
Siri
Pandora?
just said, I must have said the name of a song or something. And Siri was just like playing my music. Anybody mind if I dance for a minute? So it's so funny, I thought I was hearing something, and I was. There's a myth out there that it's about pilot pay, and I just want to lay that a little bit. Our average captain, our first year average captain last year made almost $80,000. Our average captain at Cape Air and Nantucket Airlines made well over $100,000. And we had captains at Cape Air, full-time captains, that made well in excess of $200,000 a year. So this hangover belief that this is about, we're not paying our pilots enough, that is really, really old news. The military in the United States used to provide all of the pilots needed in civilian aviation. So after World War I, after World War II, after Korea, after Vietnam, there was always an outflux from the military of pilots who had served and then went into civilian. After Vietnam, the military got smart and they said, you know what, when we train somebody to fly, we're going to keep them in. So the dynamic with military aviators really changed. And the civilian world came really late to the dance as far as understanding that if we're going to have pilots, we need to make our own. So you're starting to see the major airlines react to that, but we still have a few years that are very challenging as far as that is concerned. Our pilots are organized. They're organized in the Teamsters Union. So we are right now in negotiation for a new 3-year contract. We're coming to the end of a 3-year contract with them. And we're at the table with them right now. Linda leads that negotiation, working out a new contract. We have a very good relationship with our pilot group. And as most of you know, we're an employee-owned company. So when you check in at our ticket counter or when you're flying one of our airplanes, they're flown, they're maintained, and you're checked in by an employee owner at Cape Air also.
Yeah, this shows you the graph of where we were with Cape Air pilots in October of 2013. We had about 160 pilots, and where we are today, we are at 77. So that's a pretty significant decrease in the number of pilots that we have at Cape Air. We've done some other creative things. We have a classification of a part-time pilot and an on-call pilot that gives pilots more flexibility that other airlines don't do. So we're really trying to be really creative and think of other solutions to entice pilots, not only just to come to Cape Air, but to retain the pilots we have on property as well.
Are some of your pilots pilots also for other airlines who
We have a few pilots that also work charters or work for corporate jet airlines, so they come in and fly for us either part-time or on-call. And they're great pilots. They're great mentors. We also have a Gray Gull program where we recruit retired pilots that age out at the major airlines. They age out at age 65, and we hire them at Cape Air. They're great mentors. They're great aviators. They have a passion for flying, and so we're happy to have them on board.
I classify as a gray gull now, after 40 years of flying. I still fly the line on the weekends. And I remember when people looked at me and said, "You're too young to do this," and now they look at me and say, "You're too old to do this." Funny how fast that happens. One of the really exciting news is I was over in Italy last week, and for the third time flew the Tecnam Traveler, which is going to be our next generation replacement airplane for the Cessna 402. The biggest mistake that airlines make is about equipment. And if Cape Air and Nantucket Airlines has been disciplined in any way over the past number of years, it's that we haven't gone for equipment that either wasn't the right fit relative to safety and service or wasn't the right fit economically. And I will say, given the challenges that we talked about earlier with the remoteness, with the overwater, with the seasonality of this market, we have had to be really careful and disciplined about what type of equipment we serve the market with. I am not a believer in serving this market in a single-engine airplane. The biggest temptation we've had over the last 15 years is to go with some of the single-engine aircraft that are out there, either a Pilatus or a Cessna Caravan. But as a pilot, and I'm also a mechanic, I've been a mechanic for 36 years. As a pilot and a mechanic, I just never felt completely comfortable, given that we do 130, 140,000 flights a year for our employees and for our customers, doing that in a single-engine airplane. If you're flying to Nantucket in February over ocean water that is 32 degrees at night in instrument conditions, our feeling, and this is our feeling alone, I mean, I'm not dissing other carriers who haven't made the same feeling, but our feeling is the safety of having two engines is an absolute necessity. Last year, actually, just to make sure that I wasn't sort of doing tribal knowledge, we hired what I consider to be the best consultants in the industry. They came in and they looked at the Cape Air profile, and they looked at some of our past incidents and situations. They did an analysis of single versus multi-engine and came back with with outcomes and with output that said, indeed, we would be exposing our own customers and flights to a different level of risk should we switch to single. About 10 years ago, we put out a request for proposal worldwide to about 20 different aircraft manufacturers. We settled on Tecnam, which is one of the larger general aviation manufacturers in the world. They're based just outside of Naples, Italy, which makes a visit to Tecnam a really difficult business trip. Anybody would like to go to Tecnam and see the airplane being manufactured. We started negotiating with them both on price and on aircraft design 6 years ago. They've been designing and getting the airplane certificated for the last 6 years. I flew the airplane for about 2 hours last week around Mount Vesuvius and out over the Bay of Naples, and it's a really, really nice airplane. It's got one more seat than the 402, so you'll have a pilot and a first officer up front, 9 passenger seats in the back. It's got about 20% more power than the 402. It's a really, really safe, modern, all-glass cockpit, air conditioning. Not that it matters on Nantucket because you've got natural air conditioning here, but on the Boston end it certainly will matter. So we're really excited. We've ordered a hard order for the first 20, and we've actually put the deposit down for the first 20, and then we've got options on the next 80. So we've actually ordered 100 airplanes to replace our fleet. We've got the financing for that all lined up, and that kicks in now. We have been really conservative over the past 34 years, which is why we're not on the list that you saw up there earlier. Been very deliberative about the aircraft type, managed our balance sheet very, very conservatively, so our ability to finance these airplanes and to make this transition is a reality, And we're really, really excited about phasing these airplanes in over the next number of years throughout our route structure. That's what it looks like on the inside. You will love it. And that's what it looks like on the outside. Go back to the inside for 1 sec. The person in the last row in this airplane will not have to be sitting like this. It's really it's a bigger airplane. It's really comfortable. You all will love it. So you can go to the last slide, which is that's the final slide. That's what it looks like in the factory in Naples, Italy. Beautiful airplane, flies really nicely, and again, it's got all of the modern safety and operational acumens. The engines are modern technology engines, and again, the avionics, navigation equipment. It's a beautiful airplane. It'll serve this market really well. So that having all been said, again, I should have come here 33 years ago. I shouldn't have had to make you wait for 34 years. But anytime we can help with that, either about industry trends or what's going on with our company, please just pick up the call, give Linda a call, give me a call, give Elise a call. Better yet, give Bruce Miller a call. He lives here. And we would be happy to have that discussion. It's a really dynamic, really volatile, really exciting, really fun industry. But it's also a really challenging industry. And we really feel privileged to be a part of providing air transportation on and off Nantucket. I hope nobody here or watching on television ever feels like we take that for granted. It's a unique place to serve, and we absolutely love it. And I flew us over today, and I can tell you, I had a great day, but flying here and flying back after this meeting will definitely be the high point of my day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You might stick fairly close to the microphone. I'm going to give the commission a chance to make comments or ask questions, if that's all right. And then I will carefully allow the audience to address you through me. So if that's all right with you. Mr. Gasparo, do you have anything you want to?
I would just say thanks for coming. Appreciate the information and the improvements that you laid out. Those sort of were some of the comments or questions I would have had. I think that you probably diffused them to some extent, and it's appreciated. How many of the new airplanes, or how do you foresee, you don't have to go too into discussion, but your transition plan?
We're working on that now. So one of the things that Linda has said to me is, okay, now that you promised 34 communities this airplane, how are you going to do that? We will get back to you with a plan, because I think we owe it to everybody to say, here's how the airplane is going to be phased in. It's going to start here, because they're going to be giving us a technician to be on property for the first year that we're operating the airplane. So that it's going to be in our backyard initially. We have to do all the training here in the Cape and Islands, so you'll see it around. How much of it we integrate into which fleet, we got to work that plan out, so we will be. One other really exciting thing a couple of months ago, I went over to Israel to visit a company called Eviation. You should write that down, because they have a website. And Eviation is designing the first all-electric airplane to be used in scheduled air service. And they sent a group over last week from Israel to try to work out a memorandum of understanding. But one of the other things I think is going to be really cool is we have identified Hyannis, Nantucket as the first place we're going to deploy the electric airplane. And you're looking at a 3 to 5 year window for that, because they're in a much earlier design phase. But won't that be cool to introduce? It will be, I believe, the first all-electric airplane used in scheduled air service in the United States. And you can see it. It's called the Alice. I don't know why they came up with that name, but it looks like something from the Jetsons. And anybody you'll date yourself if you know who the Jetsons were. But but to answer your question, we don't have a plan exactly for how we're going to phase the TechNam in yet. So as we get that, we'll let you know.
Thank you. That's all.
I'm encouraged by your presentation today, as I was a year or so ago, and was disappointed that did not follow through as to when we had our meeting with some of your employees or higher management. So I'm hoping that you will continue to do what you're saying you're doing and not let us down again. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and it's really broken my heart. I mean, one of the things about being a local business, I learned to fly here 41 years ago, is you don't like to do that in your backyard. So the entire executive team meets every morning to look at the prior day's results and plan that day's results. And it is working. I mean, having all of the senior people in a room owning each and every service failure, but also celebrating each and every service success is a really powerful thing to do. So I appreciate that. And you never give up on proving that you are worthy of a good reputation. That is something you have to reinvent every morning. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let us know how we're doing.
Ms. Glanzer?
I appreciate you also coming and make yourselves available and having an open discussion.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Buscarin, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes. I was just looking at my website on the Technom aircraft. What's the engine manufacturer?
It's a Lycoming EIO 540 engine, but they're made in Pennsylvania. One of the things that scares the heck out of me is the tariff thing, because the engines are made in the U.S., all of the avionics are made in the U.S., the wheels and brakes are made in the U.S., but no one here would make the airplane for us. So all of that stuff goes over to Italy, and they build an airplane and then send it back. But it's a Lycoming engine. I would say probably half of the airplanes that are on your field have Lycoming engines in them.
Thank you. I'm well acquainted with
375
Lycoming.
horsepower.
Anything else? Mr. Buscarin?
Nothing else, thank you.
I would say that since Mr. Rafter and I came to see you a year ago, and it was just a year ago, it was in June of last year, certainly some of the horror stories that we carried to you at that time have not been repeated, and I verified that with Mr. Rafter this morning. There are still areas where things could be improved. I mean, I think the fundamental service has gotten a lot better. You're dealing with the pilot issue and so forth. But service isn't just the plane, as you know. And I'm going to suggest, and we'll talk about this the next time, but maybe we should have what is called a workshop with you, if you're willing to participate in such a thing in the fall sometime, when things have quieted down a bit, at least in this neck of the woods. But keep it up is what I'm going to say. And thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate it. And so is there anybody in the audience who would like to address any comments or questions to Mr. Wolf through me? Yes, sir. Would you identify yourself, please? You're going to have to come up to the microphone, too. Sorry.
Dan and Dan, Steve Drapkin, former retired postmaster here. But I want to thank you, number one, for all the service we had the years I was in the mail. As a pilot question, the plane appears to be not de-iced and have fixed gear. Is that in fact the case?
It's definitely de-iced, and it's got a different type of de-icing system. It's called TKS, which is really a wet wing system as opposed to inflatable boots. It's got a really nice de-icing system. It does have fixed gear, and that's for simplicity and reliability. So yeah, yes, it is de-iced, but yes, it also has fixed gear.
All right, one other quick question. Does this have to be certified by the FAA? And what's the procedure for that?
So it is in the final stages. It's a great question. You obviously have a background in this. It is in the final stages of certification, and it's being certified by IOSA, which is the international in partnership with the FAA. So when any airplane like Airbus that's not made in the U.S., they go through a dual certification. So it is in the process, the final processes now of certification, both with the FAA and with the European agency.
Thanks so much, both.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, again, thank you very much for taking the time to come over and visit with us. We appreciate it.
We really appreciate it. We'd love to do a workshop with you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Finance matters, Mr. Rafter. We have our own.
It's the time of year again where the repayment to the town is transferred to the reserve account. And is there a vote required on this, Janine?
I'm sorry?
Is there a vote required on transfer to the
I
reserve?
thought we
I
did,
think so.
I thought we
I thought
did it
there was.
last time, didn't we?
I wasn't here
here at the last meeting, so.
No,
All right. Well, we've already paid it, right?
it's,
It's in the process right now.
All right.
It would be held in it's being held in a reserve fund anyways, but the payment has not actually been made.
All right. So we need a motion to approve the payment. Isn't it part of the budget? The approved budget?
it's put into the budget, but as I recall, the commission wanted to have authority over approving that actual
Over
transfer.
the final.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there,
Is this, is it a, not part of what the FAA and?
It is part of it, and that's why it's being put in a reserve account right now until such time as the FAA authorizes it. And this is the amount less the in-kind services that we provided.
Okay.
So it's an accounting issue is what it is right now, essentially.
And if the FAA does not approve, then it's much less than.
a little less, not a lot less.
Yeah, just a little, or they'll
Is it,
do a change in time or a change in the money, whatever it is.
is there a motion to approve the transfer to, or the repayment to the town of $209,208.93
I'll make that motion.
to be placed in a reserve account pending resolution of the issue of payment with the FAA?
Now, second?
Thank you. Any other comment? Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. Republic Parking Budget Review, you have that in your packet.
And I believe it was updated.
Updated it, but,
Handout
yeah.
one. Essentially, it's flat, showing a net increase of 1% in revenue. But again, as I described to the chairman this morning, there's a lot of unknowns. If you recall, last year, we didn't institute the system until midway through the summer, and then we forgave a lot of the violations and did a transition to get folks acclimated to the system. So we don't have any real history of the new operating system and/or the new agreement with Republic through a full peak season. So we'll have that hopefully in just another few months. But so this is essentially a flat budget compared to last year.
Are there any comments or questions? I did notice that the parking lot looked relatively full this morning. Relatively.
It peaks and valleys, but again, it's for short durations.
Right. No, I mean the back, I meant the back
the back
parking.
part,
yeah.
All right, is there a motion to approve the parking budget for 2018-19?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Buscarin, by the way, Mr. Buscarin, for your information, Mrs. Topham has excused herself from the balance of the meeting. How do you vote?
Okay.
How do you vote on the motion to approve the parking budget?
I vote aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Capital requests, fiscal year 19. Do you want to go over those? Mr.
Yes,
Rasser?
there's two handouts, actually. One is it's technically the requests for 2020 that we're going to be proposing and delivering to the town in another week or so. And the first item on that is Great Harbor Yacht Club stanchion removal project. Some of you may recall years ago there was a fuel pipeline that ran down along the Great Harbor Yacht Club, and our staff removed the pipeline a few years ago. The stanchions and piles are still there, and one has broken off below the water line. We did receive some estimates for the removal, but we're going to have to go through a formal permitting process and things, so we're putting that in the 2020 budget. There's a total of 22 piles that are in the line there. The next project is a sanitary sewer waste treatment upgrade, and that is to properly treat the sewer that or the waste that we're removing from the aircraft. Right now, we have it trucked out, and I think if I'm incorrect, I'll ask Noah to jump in on that one, but that's that project. Airport 6 is a replacement of a truck that is a 2004 dump truck. Next is the paint and beads and rubber marking removal. That's the ongoing one. You may recall that increased significantly a few years ago because MassDOT formerly did it, but they don't have the funds anymore. And the last is a tractor mower skid steer deck for brush cutting. And again, that's for part of our environmental management program as well. The other handout, and I'm glad to take questions, but I just wanted to, I asked that the other two items be put in here. They technically may become FY19 projects. We're going to go before the special town meeting for FY19. As many of you know, there was a omnibus spending bill that was approved for $1 billion of infrastructure in airports. And unfortunately, non-primary airports would get 100%, but primary airports will be eligible for up to 90% of funding, just like our normal AIP. So the two projects that we're going to be putting forward are the Taxiway Echo project and security improvements. We held a scoping meeting last week with FAA and MassDOT on Taxiway Echo. And at this point in time, the number is 10 million, but that may even climb a little higher because there are a number of standards issues that need to be addressed. The access control system is replacing and integrating a number of systems, the access control system itself, the CCTV systems, integrating the two of those and expanding it, as well as our badging and credentialing system, replacing that and modernizing it. Any questions on the either FY19 or 20? If they are not, how should I say this? If we don't perform them in the FY19, we're still looking for appropriation STM. The thought is $1 billion in omnibus funding. There's also talk of a $750 million additional FAA spending bill. It's going to free up discretionary funds one way or the other. And Taxiway Echo has been on our project list for a few years now, so one way or the other, we're hoping that that gets done within the next 2 years.
But there will be no state contribution to this?
I did find out today, we were making an assumption that there was not because it was a last minute thing, but I spoke to Tom Mahoney at MassDOT today, and they're planning on a normal 5%. So it will be a 90 FAA 5 state 5 airport.
Should this be amended then to?
Yeah, we should probably put that note in there. I'll change that. And on the $1 billion item, it was in the Federal Register yesterday. We've already begun, Janine drafted a letter today, which is a first step in notifying them of our interest and intent and what projects we'd like to use it for. So we're beginning that process already.
Do we need formal approval of these?
I don't think so. I think I wanted to make you aware of those because this is what we're going to be submitting to town before it went downtown. I wanted to make sure you saw.
Well, I suppose the one that is going to special town meeting, maybe we should.
Number's not final? That number's not final?
Okay.
Yeah, the numbers
All
aren't
right.
final.
Okay.
We'll get those to you, but
All right.
again, this is a heads up right now. But yeah, you're right, Dan, before
Yeah.
town meeting
Right.
approved the article.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any questions on any of those? Now I've lost my agenda. What is the manager?
Yeah, go ahead. No grant acceptance. Is that
Oh,
ready?
that's
Yeah,
not
we don't have the
we
grant
don't
yet,
have it
so-
yet, So,
Manager's report.
manager's report, thank you.
So on the project side of the house, the vault replacement is moving along. In fact, it's going online tomorrow, the changeover with a temporary backup generator. There's a long lead on the generator. That will be probably in place by September, but effective tomorrow, we'll be going on to the new electrical system with the new switchgear and regulators and touchscreen control in the control tower. The FIDS PA project, the FAA was on site for final inspection on June 27th. We're ready to close that out. There's still some outstanding funding questions on that, and I've reached out and left a message to the MassDOT Aeronautics Director today, waiting for a response on that. Apron 3 was also completed, inspected on the same day, and we're moving to close out on that item as well. On the geometry issues, the alternatives draft has been sent to the FAA and the subject matter expert panel, and there's a meeting set up, I believe it's later this week, I think it's Thursday, to review those alternatives. Crosswinds to Go is moving forward. They have all of the equipment in. They're just waiting for their electrician to come back and complete some work. And they indicated that once he's done that, it's just a matter of a couple of days before they'll open that up. The additional capacity program, our 5th position on the commercial ramp, we had to suspend use of that temporarily. Unfortunately, we found that there were some drain covers or sewer covers that we couldn't get the information on what the capacities were, the weight-bearing capacity, so Noah's working with our maintenance department as well as the engineers and just redesigning the line for that in a tow-in, tow-out process. Taxiway Alpha, as you recall, was written up in the certification inspection. That work has been completed, and again, was final inspection for that was also on the 27th. On an item that gentleman brought up at our last meeting on the app ride, TNC, whatever they're call themselves now, we have designated an area in the parking lot for the pickup and drop off of those services. We are adding additional signs to the entrance of the parking lot, as well as wayfinding signs for the passengers coming out of the terminal to direct them across the walkways into the parking lot for those that area. Rates and charges of products have been received, and we're in the process of reviewing those. On the RFP bid update, we're continuing negotiations with Airport Gas. The Sun Island RFP is will be available on the 18th, and proposals are due in August 22nd. On the operations side of the house, all the seasonal carriers are up and operating. Film festival sales were up about 4% over last year, which offset the decrease over Memorial Day, and July 4th sales were up about 10% over last year. We discussed the capital. We did receive our de-icer truck, timely. But it is a very nice unit, self-contained, it's not a tow behind, and we'll be going through training in that in the fall. On June 17th, it was a Sunday, our jet farm motor stopped, and fortunately for me, I was on vacation that week when Noah had to deal with it. But a great effort on maintenance operations, Noah's part. They got very creative. They were able to accept fuel even without the pump working. They scrambled around, found the parts, and had it repaired, so that's back up and operational. And we also experienced a slight blip in our fuel supply just before the 4th of July. There was a problem at the depot, and they didn't ship for 2 days, but the supplier backfilled and got us back up to speed, so we didn't have an issue. Any questions before I move on to statistics? So in the operations department, we continue to see a decline. May was down almost 30%, year-to-date 18%. The GA operations were down about 5% over last May. The employments were up 8% though, that's a good sign, and year-to-date they're only down 2.3%. Cape Air saw a 20% increase. JetBlue experienced a 23% increase as well. And Nantucket Air saw a 52% decrease, with trade winds being down 18% and Retrix up 61% over last May. In the Boston market, Cape Air experienced a 6% increase, while JetBlue saw a 4% decrease. I believe the JetBlue decrease was due to a timing startup and one flight that go. It was less than last year. The DCA market saw a 26% decrease, and again, most likely associated with number of flights. New Bedford traffic continued to increase with a 65% increase, or 269 passengers. So that's a continuous climb now for 3 months in a row, I believe, on that. The Hyannis market saw a total decrease of 7%, as Mr. Wolf was indicating earlier, or 126 passengers, with Cape Air up 181 passengers, Nantucket Air decreasing by 613, and Retrix increasing by 306. JetBlue in the JFK market had a 23% increase, or 272 passengers. Vineyard traffic was down 16%, or 28 passengers. And the Jet A gallons sold for May were down 9.13% and up 7.23% for the year. For June, they were down 0.8% and year-to-date up 4%. Avgas was up 8.23% for May and year-to-date down 11.5%. June was up 12% and for the fiscal year down 9%. Freight for May was down 16% over, or I'm sorry, 0.16% over last May and up 2.36% year-to-date. And on the noise side of the house, there was one complaint versus 7 last year, and it was a complaint received regarding IFR traffic, and a follow-up was provided to the resident.
Any questions on the statistics? All right,
Concludes my report.
thank you. Are there any commissioners' comments? Mr. Buscarin, do you have any?
I have none, thank you.
Pleasure. Mr. Gasparo?
I just wanted to follow up on the manager's report, as well as the comments that were made for public comment last time.
I apologize, I should have addressed that, I just thought of that. But go ahead if you
No,
like.
go ahead.
Do it. There are a number of items that were brought to our attention, including the landscaping in front of the terminal, which has been addressed, a bench in the area between the gazebo and the terminal, which we put one there. There was a trash barrel that somebody relocated to the parking lot. We added one back to that same area. The striping for the taxi cabs has been painted, or repainted, I should say. We did meet with the police department, Officer Janine Malden, and went over the concerns that we had, and wanted to set the stage beginning of the season on the zero tolerance on the handicap area, keeping them moving on the curb, those types of things. And she has relayed that to her officers that are out there. The only item I believe that was mentioned and is still open and is going to take a while is the change to the rules and regulations regarding the queue line in the taxi cab. So we'll do that in our next review of the rates or the rules and regulations.
Thank you. My only follow-up question on that was, that's great with the respect to the police department. Is people picking up and dropping off in the space that's designated for taxis only a ticketable offense? In other words, it's like too late when, I understand they just kind of move them along, but it's the one infraction that I just see
I think
almost
the biggest
every time I go to the airport.
Is in that drop-off zone?
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be a ticket, and that's one we told them too, was zero tolerance. We said, look, the areas that are marked, they shouldn't be dropping off in. If it's a cab, it should be a cab.
But I think if we do that, it should be, there should be signage where drop-off is permitted.
We have that.
Everywhere else it is.
Along the right-hand curb there.
There's only one spot. There's delivery, there's taxi, and I think there's like one small area. So we could put a sign there. But we're trying to encourage them to use the left side.
Yeah, but it's not clear from my perspective.
We'll take a look at that.
The only specific spot that I've just noticed is, if you've got a sign that says taxis only, you've got striping on the ground, and
that's why it should
the
be
people
zero.
just blow it off because it's the best spot in the house and just continually do it. But they're not paying the fees the taxis are paying in servicing the airport. So I'm happy to hear, or at least I hope, that if people do that, they should get a ticket. Thanks.
Well, I have no comments tonight. Is there public comment at this time? Sir?
David Barrett, a taxi owner. Regarding the spot that we were just talking about, that happens to us all the time. And I was suggesting to the officer yesterday, that if we take just an orange cone and put it to the rear, outside of the rear of that,
Of the marked
of
area?
the second marked area, so that when they're coming in, they can't, if it's in their face, they're going to have to run it over to get in there. I mean, it would be a visual that would be I think would be very helpful. And the signage could be taxis only, something very, very abrupt, taxis only, taxi drop-off or whatever. You get some cabs that come in there, and they'll drop off, and they'll sit there. And I told one the other day, I said, once you drop off, get out. You know, if you're going to write on your way bill or anything, pull around the corner and do it, because people are trying to get in there. You've got two big aircraft on the ground. There's almost 200 people that are going to be, trying to go on the planes. And make the space available for the taxis to drop off, so we don't have to drop off in the middle of the street. And a couple other things. There's the handicap sign over by the new building, the long one. Uber seems to be thinking that that's their pickup and drop off. I got pictures here of that area. I think I was talking to the officer today, and he agreed with me that handicap sign is 8 or 10 feet away from the curb. If you take it up and you put it in, I've got pictures where I think it should be, between the curb and the bricks. Take out a couple of bricks and put it right.
Would you mind stopping in the office with those pictures?
I'm going to give them to you now.
No, stop in the office with them, please.
Okay. And the other thing is to paint repaint the blue on the ground.
That's in process.
Is it? Yeah, I figured it was.
We're issued
Yeah.
just to get some.
Can I leave some of these with the?
Yeah, I'll take.
Yeah. These are all.
I don't want them. I want you to take them into the office
thank you.
yourself,
See.
please.
All
No.
right. Okay. I wasn't being rude, I was just trying to be helpful, because I showed pictures the last meeting.
Okay.
There are a number of pictures of Ubers parked all over the place, picking up, dropping off, standing there after they get through. And there are a couple of them that repeatedly park on the crosswalks, and I've asked them, and the police officer asked them to move. And when they finish their cigarettes, they would move. But they seem to hog that left-hand side for their, like I said in the last meeting, and they're still doing it. There's an awful lot of Uber traffic in there that's in the way of the people who should be there. People picking up their families and taxis trying to do their job. And another thing, the Ubers are not still, the cops are trying to call their attention to it. They are not identifying themselves with the U that they're compelled to put in their upper right-hand windshield and in the back window. Then they're just not doing it. And if you go over and ask them, are you an Uber? They deny it, but you can look on the app and see them sitting right there. They are Uber. So they're trying, they're very coy about what they're doing. And thank you for what you've done so far.
Is there a taxi cab association? The answer is that,
No, not really.
okay. All right, we'll probably be reaching out to each individual then too. We just have some other thoughts.
I'd be glad to help you with what I know from the past.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thank you. Anything else? Sir?
Hey, my name is Frank Hanlon, and I want to introduce myself as the new president of the Nantucket Flight Association. Just voted in last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Hopefully, we'll be working closely with the board on various issues related to building public knowledge of what the airport does and how they help the community, and anything that you guys have that you might want to ask us to help you out with. Maybe another airport day, that would be gratefully appreciated, and we'll be offering our help in any way. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Anybody else? All right, I will then entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session, under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to review executive session minutes as enumerated on the agenda. for possible release or for review and possible release. And under B, to discuss strategy with respect to pending litigation in respect to airport improvement plan, AIP projects. The chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the Airport Commission. C, Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. The chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission. And D, Clause 6, to discuss strategy with respect to the airport gas lease and negotiations. The chair has determined that open session may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the Airport Commission. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Casparo? And the chair votes aye. All right, we just have a couple of quick signings, so don't go away, Tony.
Okay.